Hello and welcome to the Cardiac Cats YouTube channel. I'm your host, Jacob Shorba, and today we've got some more breaking news before free agency as the Jaguars have come to terms with two of their potential free agents, those being safety, more so special teamer, Daniel Thomas, and also left guard Ezra Cleveland. So we're going to talk about this. We're going to break down the numbers, what we know so far. I will go ahead and let you guys know we do not have every single deal yet. Or detail, that is. I have tried to find it. I waited a couple hours. Nothing more has come out. So I'm going to tell you what I do know and just give you my thoughts on these moves. So we're going to kick it off talking about Daniel Thomas. Probably the quicker conversation of this because it's pretty simple, right? He's not a starter, but he is a very good special teamer. And he's a very good backup for this team in the secondary. Daniel Thomas has been one of the best gunners in the NFL for quite a while now since he came into the league. You can go look up his PFF grades if you want on special teams. Done a really good job. This is someone who's earned another contract with the team, who has found value in the NFL on a special teams role. It makes sense to bring him back. Now, when I projected what was going to be the deal originally, I figured it would probably be something like $1.75 million a year. Came pretty close, ends up being a 2-year deal instead of 3, which was my projection. It was originally I thought it would be 3. And then ends up being $2 million, with the potential to make up to $3 million each season. And so I don't know what the parameters of that are. We'll see. But the way it works with salary cap is essentially when you have incentives, you pay for, as far as how it goes against salary cap, right? The incentives that they are expected to make, which is determined based off how they performed the year before, imagining if those stats happen again. Those incentives are counted against the cap. So with this, I don't know what the incentives are yet. I don't think we'll know as fans. I don't know if that's even going to be disclosed, but it will go based off of what he did last year. If he did that season, then the incentives would count against the cap. So we're assuming it's probably incentives above what he did last season, and he's probably looking at $2 million each season. So we'll go ahead. We're going to add that on here to our salary cap situation. So I'll come down here. I'll show you what the deal probably looks like. Now, I can't confirm this is exactly it, but this is the way the Jaguars usually structure deals. The way they do it, the first year, the base salary is the absolute minimum that you can do. The second year, it changes. So that season, you have the normal base salary. And then everything extra for your first year, like basically your average per year minus your base salary the first year, that's your signing bonus. So if it's $2 million, you have an $875,000 signing bonus. Because that add with this is $2 million. And your base salary for the second year is $2 million. So you can do the math on these numbers. This adds up to $4 million. That's how the Jaguars do it. But as far as the deal, look, I mean, whether or not we see the value of special teams or pay much attention to it, it is an important facet of the NFL. There are still a lot of snaps taken on special teams. And Daniel Thomas is one of the more valuable players in the NFL at it. So I was very much fine with this deal. I projected him returning to the Jaguars, have no problem with it whatsoever. And, you know, he's one of the players who deserves to be paid more than the veteran minimum to be in this kind of role because he does have that value. So congratulations to him. Happy to see him come back. Really good special teamer for this team. Now our second guy. Bigger conversation here because I know, based off my Twitter, a lot of Jaguars fans do not like Ezra Cleveland. And I can understand why. But I want to try to explain more than just what you saw, right? Because I think that is what is so often missed when we're evaluating him. There's no conversation about who he was with Minnesota. There's no conversation about why he left Minnesota other than a very basic way of looking at it that does not go into the details. And so I want you guys to understand a little bit more about this because I think it'll change your mind on it a bit. And it doesn't mean I'm right. Like, I'm just going to say that. There's a chance that he just isn't as good next year and, you know, he's just not a great fit for this team. I think he is, but we got to see what happens. So let's jump into that. So Ezra Cleveland, I want to show you his grades here. So you got 2023, two different teams he played with, right? He also played in 2020, 2021, 2022. The story of each year for him, and this is who he's been for a long time, he is a really good run blocker. He is one of the best run blockers at the guard position, one of the better ones, especially for younger players. That is something he has very much been known for. The question has been about who he is as a pass blocker. So that's been the concern. Coming into 2023, the two things with Ezra Cleveland that people were talking about was, is this guy going to be a better pass blocker? And the other thing was, is he a player who wants to play tackle? Is he a player who's going to force his way out over that? I think that narrative is very overblown. I heard people talking about it when he came to Jacksonville, and I just went back and listened to interviews from him, and it wasn't even mentioned. Like, they asked him how he felt about it, and he's like, I'll play guard. If they want me to play guard, I'll play guard. And he signed to be a guard. So that wasn't a problem. We know that. But the question was, can he improve as a pass blocker? And so the answer to that is, at the beginning of the season, it was a resounding yes. He was a much better pass blocker. You just look at these stats, right? First 6 games of the season. 73 overall grade, right? But the run blocking, pass blocking, basically identical. And you're always going to have this with pretty much all your players, where there'll be some games they don't do as good, but it averages out after so long. And he gave up, 1 sack? And I watched that sack, by the way. It was against Chris Jones. Like, that's the one player you're probably going to be fine with doing that against. Not that you want to, but it's a pretty good excuse. It's freaking Chris Jones. So he played really well to start the year. Here's the narrative, though. The narrative is that Ezra Cleveland lost his job, he was benched, and that's why he was traded to Jacksonville. And it's not necessarily wrong, but it's a narrative that has a lot more under the surface that people don't want to talk about when they don't like the guy. And like I said, I understand why people don't like him, because you come down here, you look at the grades, yeah, it was not good with Jacksonville. Like, I'm not denying that, but there are reasons for it. There are a lot of reasons. One of them being Luke Fortner. But after week 6, you can see he didn't play his normal share of snaps, ended up going in 47 and then got hurt during that game. The Vikings signed Dalton Risner, who was a free agent deep into the season. Why? I don't know. He should have been signed well before, but the Vikings made a very good move and signed him. Dalton Risner, funny enough, graded out worse during week 7 and 8 while Ezra Cleveland was recovering. Now, doesn't mean he was necessarily worse on the field, right? Because PFF can be off, and Risner played pretty well. Those were the 2 best weeks for the Minnesota Vikings offensive line. That's when you saw the team just start competing at a high level. They were much better. And then, unfortunately, Kirk Cousins got hurt after. But at that point, you have to understand where Minnesota was as a team. They didn't know if they wanted to keep Ezra Cleveland the next year, right? They didn't know if they wanted to extend him. All of a sudden, he's playing better in a contract year. I mean, sometimes teams think hard about that. Sometimes they get worried about it. And meanwhile, you have another guy who you basically bring in for nothing, who comes in and plays really well and clearly is worth starting on the team. So what do? When you get a call from Jacksonville, who has the former offensive line coach of your team, the one that was there when Ezra Cleveland was drafted, and says, hey, we'd like to get this guy. We need a left guard. We'll give you something for him. Well, you take the trade. And the counter argument is, well, what if Minnesota wanted the comp pick? And I think the comp pick would have been worth more, because it's going to be a 5th or a 4th if he hits the market, right? Because he's probably going to earn a little bit more based off the fact that he would probably come back and play. He would have been much better in Minnesota's system. And if he's on the market, the price is getting driven up as well. So I think he probably would have landed a 4th round comp pick if you're not canceling that out. So there is that argument. But at the same time, what you have to understand is it forces you to not be able to spend on certain players. Like, Minnesota would not be able to go out and sign a player for a similar value because it would cancel out that pick. So they then have to start thinking about it. And it's really a question of, like, is it worth it? Is it not? And so that's why you consider the trade, because you know you get that 6th rounder. And it was Carolina's 6th rounder, by the way, which, if you didn't know, was the first pick in the 6th round. So that's the situation with Ezra Cleveland. That's why he was traded. And like we said, you see he got much worse when he played with Jacksonville. More so the final weeks of the season. But you have to understand the situation he comes into, right? This is a guy who was seen as one of the better young guards in the NFL for 3.5 years. He gets traded across the country, middle of the season. His first game is sitting on the bench, watching the team have its first collapse of the season against the 49ers. And technically, you could say Texans was an earlier collapse, but they got things figured out, right? They were better as a team. Jacksonville, you could kind of tell something was wrong around that point of the year. So that's his first experience with the team. You see the offensive line start getting hurt. You have Cam Robinson go down shortly after he returns. Now he's playing with Walker Little to the left. Cam comes back late season too, so you've got guys around you switching. And to your right, you have the one guy who doesn't get injured on the offensive line, Luke Fortner, who, if you didn't know, didn't play that well last year. And if he played better, it might be a different story for him, for Ezra, and for Brandon Scherf. So the situation was really bad. Now, that does not mean automatically that Ezra Cleveland is just a star and he's going to be the greatest player in the world going down the road. We don't know. But I will say this, I would be very comfortable as a team taking a bet on Ezra because I saw him be a much better player at the start of the season in a situation that he was familiar with and comfortable with. He's with a coach that he's played with before. He's going to have the whole offseason to get ready. He's not going to be playing hurt, by the way. Keep in mind, he did get hurt during this period. So that is another factor. I mean, he's going to earn this kind of money on the market and probably more. And so I like this move. I do for Jacksonville. As far as the numbers, this is what we know right now. $28.5 million. So that's 3 years. What that means is $9.5 million a year. Now, I do not know for a fact that this is going to be exactly $28.5 million, because sometimes when they say a deal is worth something, what they mean is at the maximum value. That is what it is worth. For example, when the Jaguars signed Christian Kirk, the way it was reported was that Christian Kirk was earning $84 million on his 4-year contract. The reality was it was $18 million a year, $72 million over 4 seasons, and the incentives were $12 million. So that might be the case here. We might be looking at a substantial amount of this being incentives. It might be a lot less. But with where you're looking at the price falling, the kind of players that are there, Ezra Cleveland easily has the upside to far surpass that. So those are my thoughts on it, guys. I'm going to add them on here, just show you where the cap is going to sit. So logically, based off of how they do things, if it's a 3-year deal, say worst case scenario, the whole $28.5 million is absolutely going to be paid and there's incentives on top of it. So like I did before, you take the APY, $9.5 million, subtract this, and this is the number you get. And then you add on your base salary for each of these years. And these are your cap hits. So you're probably looking at about $4 million against the cap this year. And the next 2 seasons, about $12.3 million each year. Then you only have 2 years guaranteed as well. So that's where we sit with the salary cap. Just under $20 million according to their projections. There is a lot of money the team can still save. I think they're probably considering or currently negotiating a rework deal with at least Cam Robinson, potentially Brandon Scherf as well. Because those are players that I just cannot justify them not at least revisiting the contract, right? There's no way. Because these guys played average, and they're getting paid best of the best money. So there should be money saved. There should be money freed up. It should get better. And hopefully, maybe they can do something with Josh Allen, get him extended. I don't have my hopes high for that. I question a lot of things there. But this is where the Jaguars likely sit based off the way they usually structure contracts. So let me know what you think. Like I said, I know it's a very controversial one with Ezra Cleveland. I personally very much like the player. I've liked him for a while. I wanted Jacksonville to go trade for him before he came here. Got very lucky they did. And even though it wasn't a good year, I do think he is still a very good football player and one that is on the up and up. Still 25 years old, by the way. Something important to note. This is not an old player. So that's what I've got for you. I appreciate you watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day. And finally, go Jags.